is on this half of the map, and the red team's on the other half here. If blue team makes an aggressive play onto the right side here, sort of, you know, there's going to be, you know, some champions here, some champions here. As they make that aggressive play, as they sort of move their characters over to this space more, that means that they're going to be starting to contest this space more, and they're still sort of going to be contesting this space over here, but less so over here, right? Like they're going to start to contest less and less space over the opposite side of the map here as they move towards this area, right? And so you get this sort of movement of space as you go around, which, you know, increases in the area you're moving into and decreases from the area you're moving away from, right? And since red team now has this space more available to them, they can start moving this way more freely. That's sort of the yin yang of space there. And the same thing can be applied for resources too, right? So as blue team sort of uses resources on this right side here, they can use a lot of resources here. Sort of if all champions or their team in general is focusing on pushing over this right side of the map here, or this bottom side, I guess, from this view, then they're going to have a lot less resources that they can commit up here to this top area, and so they're going to have less of a sort of a presence there, or less ability to contest that space anymore because they don't have the resources. And so it sort of creates this sort of yin-yang of space and resources, where if the red team decides to give and take, they're just going to, as blue team moves around the map here, they're going to be giving, red team's just going to be giving this space and going the other way, right? Kind of revolves, this kind of looks like a merry-go-round. As blue takes space, red just gives it and sort of rotates away from them into the space that blue is essentially giving them. So if you choose this give and take option to responding to the enemy's aggression, there are things that you lose in the trade and there are things that you gain in the trade. And you can think about these purely in terms of resources if you think of space as a resource.
Your champion.
However, for this sort of situation, I think it's easier to think of space and resources a little bit separately.
Customize
So the
your
thing
champion.
that you lose in this trade is first the space that they're trying to take, right? Since you're just sort of giving it up, you're going to lose that space and you're going to give it to them. And the resources that you use to disengage from that space, and then as well as any resources that you might use to take space on the other side, although you really shouldn't have to use too many because they're sort of giving that up naturally as they move, right? So if you use resources to disengage from their aggression, obviously those are going to be used up and those are going to be the main ones, but there's also sort of potentially you might use some resources, maybe just like rotational resources, to sort of get to the space that they're giving you as well. So then, similarly, what you gain in this trade is the space that they give up, right? The space that you're taking on the opposite side of the map of their aggression, and their resources they used for taking your space. So you don't really, you don't necessarily gain, their resources that they use, but, you gain a resource advantage through the resources that they use for taking your space. So if you pull off this maneuver correctly, there's sort of a couple of good scenarios or good things that come out of it for you. And the first one is just very basically they needed to do something, right? It was a neutral game, they were losing points, so they needed to do something, so they tried to take some space, and you didn't really give them much for it, right? If you disengage cleanly,
the battle is about to begin.
Similar situation unless you give up some super important space. The mid won't really change, right? You're still going to be at a cap advantage if they didn't really gain anything out of that play. They also used up their resources without changing the state of the fight, right? So not only did if you did it cleanly, the state of the fight didn't really change, you still have the advantage, but you also used up some of their resources and some really important resources that they used aggressive resources, their resources that were good at taking space, they used them to take that initial space, so that next stages, right, where they're still going to have to take space because you're still over cap, right? And if you do it really effectively, they're going to use their aggressive resources to take space, you're going to give it up, you're still going to be winning the cap, advantage, and so they're going to take another play, and they're not going to have those resources that they just used to take space back up yet, and so you have to take time and stuff like that. And lastly, it also allows you to take because essentially they're giving up 60% of the map, so it's easy to take that, not contesting it that much. Mind you, the space is what they decide to give you, and you have to give up space to get this space, but I mean, it's still a space that you're sort of free, although it's probably not the most popular space. However, on the other side, there's also some bad outcomes when it comes to this option and one of the main ones that you don't really do this if the space that they're trying to take will win them the mid, right? So if you're trying to hold this single third space, and they're like, okay, we're going to take this laser, so you can just head away, it might be just the mid, such that you don't actually win the mid anymore. If they hold that position, they might actually start that sort of position, in which case you can really play because then you're in that really important space. There's also, if you do this long direction, you get rotation and just lose the fight right there. You know, if you try to rotate away and you don't do it effectively enough and you go off of it, you're essentially trying to run away and not doing it effectively, so you lose the fight because you're cutting up on like and it's sort of mentioned with the good as well, but the space that you take from them lastly is not super important space, right? Like they're giving up that space, so clearly the space that you're taking isn't going to be super high. So then, when should you choose, right? Looking at the good and the bad, when should you choose the give and take versus the second? And the basic, the most obvious one is win the outright fight. Right, so if you're playing teams that sort of want to kite and poke damage and don't really want to do all right at once, then you're probably going to be not really you can take it head on, and so you're not really going to have an option. You're always going to have to sort of kite and give that space and play the give and take game rather than just the outright fight thing. Also, you can do this when the space is right, so this is the most important thing to think about. If they're trying to take some space, to evaluate that space, you don't really actually need that space. If you take the space that they're giving you, you're still going to be able to then you can just get that up, and it won't really change the state of the game if you do it correctly. And so,
victory.
And so pretty much anything played at the top level, and Paladins included, is all about compiling very small advantages for yourself, one at a time, right? You're never really going to sort of outright win the game right away at a very high competitive level. So the give and take is a perfect place for both teams to sort of get that small little advantage to push them towards winning that fight. And so really the thing you have to think about, or the thing you're trying to get or make sure you get, is that the resources that they use to make their aggressive play plus the space that you are getting must be more valuable to you than the space that you give plus the resources you use to disengage, right? That's sort of like the trade-off, the sort of little advantages that both teams are looking for in this sort of reaction to that aggressive play. And very basically, just if you can win the fight after disengaging, you should disengage. That's sort of like my rule of thumb when it comes to these sort of reactions. So then, if it's all about these sort of getting small advantages, and if you should, and if you can win the fight after you disengage, you should disengage. Thinking about those things, then, you know, it takes a lot of sort of game knowledge and experience to be able to pull that off in the moment. You know if this is the correct play to do, right? And so there are a couple things that are really important to think about when sort of making these decisions or thinking about these decisions as you go into a game looking at the draft. And the first one is, are they using key resources to make their aggressive play, right? So if you remember in the resources lecture, we highlighted how some resources are really key to team comps, it's especially evident in these sort of games where one team is the very obvious passive reactive comp and the other team is very